Your maps are orange and yellow. We're heading in the right direction.
And no, how is it, high pressure or low pressure?
But we have both. Which one are you? What are you trying to look out for?
No, is the bad stuff that when you do the whole thing where it's really bad?
Oh, when it's bad.
That's low pressure.
That's low
right?
pressure.
Right,
yeah.
so we don't like blue. We don't
right,
like blue
low.
Or low
It gets you low because it gets you sad.
Righty tighty, lefty loosey. You know?
Right. Yeah. Something like that.
I'm sorry, that's like a 5-year-old, Mike. I do.
7 degrees today in Washington. But look at all that warm just down to the south and west. Nashville 67, Little Rock 75. Look at the 80s, Del Rio and Dallas, where they're hitting early summertime. Now, to give you that little preview, we could have numbers in this range by the time we get to, I'd say, around next weekend. So, something to look forward to heading forward here. No time soon, but you see Chicago there, 65, Cincinnati, 62. That part of this air mass will be overhead tomorrow. So I certainly think we could see our warmest day of the year. We've done 63. We did it way back on January 7th. Before all that cold and all that snow settled into the D.C. region. That's our only other 60-degree day this year so far. I think we can do 64, 65 tomorrow, especially given the fact that it should be sunny and bright and beautiful all day long. Skies clear tonight. That's letting temperatures fall back after a beautiful 57-degree day. D.C. down to 43, Dulles 44, Baltimore down to 43 degrees. And most of the rest of the area starting to fall back into the 40s, if not even some 30s, like Culpeper, Annapolis, Frederick, Maryland, they're dropping into the upper 30s. And everybody else will kind of follow suit as we get through the next several hours, including us here in D.C. Should be heading down to near the freezing mark by the time we wake up. So if you're early or heading up in the early morning, trying to get out that jog or get in that jog during the morning hours, expect things to still be cold. But as we head towards 9, 10, 11 o'clock, it'll start to warm up pretty quickly tomorrow. Not much happening, satellite and radar. System that hit us yesterday, that's this guy right here, and it's heading out to sea, and it's going to leave us alone here in Washington. Nothing but clear skies back to the west.
I love that. Look at those beautiful
sunshine, right? It's all about the color. And there's spring colors, you know. He's got me thinking Easter with the green and the yellows and then
St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, not far. What's it? That's
a couple weeks from now.
Is
it
the 19th?
I think so.
It's in there somewhere. Yeah, March holidays.
Yes, exactly. My grandmother in heaven has to make sure I know that.
Yeah, well, she's gonna be yelling at you for that.
She sure will.
You didn't know the date.
I'll hear it in my dreams tonight.
Cold kit returns. Again, enjoy tomorrow. Please do. I'll show you some numbers in just a moment because Sunday it is back to winter time. It's not going to be overly cold on Sunday afternoon. It's kind of Sunday evening when the cold settles in, and with that could come a couple of snow flurries. That's not big deal. Conversational snow flurries.
Right.
Not going to leave anything on the ground. Not going to cause any trouble there. There's your weekend summarize, 64 there on Saturday. Chillier 53 with temperatures falling. It'll get breezy. Temperatures will kind of fall the second half of Sunday. So Sunday's not a perfect day, but it's also not an awful day by any stretch of the words. Now, Monday would be awful. It's going to be cold out there on Monday. Not that it's going to be overly wet or anything like that, but it'll probably be pretty cloudy with high temperatures stuck in the 30s. So hello, wintertime. It's back here in D.C. And then what we have to watch out for is kind of Monday night now into Tuesday is when it's looking most likely. There'll be moisture that tries to push back into the D.C. region as that cold air leaves. At one time, this was looking like it could be a few inches of snow for us here in D.C. Models have been shifting just a little bit with the timing of it. It's been bringing it in later, and the later it brings it in, the less cold air it has to work with. But there is still the chance that now we could do what we call freezing rain, which is the stuff that gives us ice right around the D.C. corridor. It looks like a lighter event. I'll show you one of the models here right now, European model, one of our favorites. Doesn't have much on Monday, like during the daylight hours at all. So school hours, work hours, they should be fine on Monday. Just very, very cold day. It's Monday night into Tuesday when that sneaky little system starts coming up out of the south and out of the west. And you see that shade of pink kind of region-wide. That's that cold air trapped at the surface. It's a little warmer aloft. So you get, it looks like it falls as rain, but once it makes contact with the ground, which temperatures look like they're in the 20s on Tuesday morning, it could turn to ice in some areas. So certainly have to watch it. I will say this does look like a lighter, like nothing there's heavy. So it looks like a lighter kind of event that gets out of here pretty quickly as we get into the afternoon. Maybe even changes over to rain as warmer air spills on in. So short-lived cold air outbreak here for the first couple of the days of the week. And then here comes, look at all that warmth building out to the west, how it just takes over the east. Those deep, deep reds.
I like that.
You like to see them this time of year because they will bring you just some of the most pleasant weather. The best hot days are when you're coming out of like winter and into springtime because you have low dew points. So you're dealing with no humidity, warm temperatures, very, very comfortable. So things are looking better as we head towards the end of the week. We are getting through winter here pretty steadily. And we're at the time of year where the days get longer. We're getting 2.5 minutes of daylight each and every day now. So we're adding temperatures, or we're getting our average temperatures up quickly. I mean, look, by
good.
April, it's in the average highs in the 60s. By May, it's in the 70s. So we will rapidly rise as far as those temperatures are concerned over the next 2 months. And what's everybody like? Longer days and later sunsets, too. And you really get that next weekend. This is the first weekend where the sun's going to set after 6 o'clock in the evening. You don't have to wait long for it to set after 7 because we spring forward. We lose an hour of next weekend. That's never fun. But the trade-off is your sun starts going down after 7 o'clock as we get into daylight saving time. I always used to say daylight savings.
Yeah, is it
It's not. It's
saving?
not. There's no. It's saving, not savings.
How many words do we know or phrases that have that what we think it actually is, what the rest of the world says it, and it actually
in the weather
doesn't
department,
mean
we
that
got a
same
lot of
thing?
those.
I know.
But
It's
there's your
nuts.
7-day. Again, watch that Monday night in the Tuesday system. We'll keep you updated on just how much ice that will be. I wouldn't, on the big deal-o-meter, as I like to call that, probably a little more minor as opposed to certainly what we've been through. There are some rain chances towards the end of next week, but it would definitely just be all rain. But look at that high next Friday. I could be sitting with you right here in shorts and a t-shirt next Friday.
I think we should do
saying
that,
it's 70
my friend.
degrees. I think
You
we
know,
should.
Let's just
Ties
shake
on a
on it.
Friday? What is this?
I mean, look, it's my first time doing it. I did,
you wanna
do
make
you
an
like it or not
impression.
on my own? My first time doing this, you know, kind of. I gotta
You gotta
look good, you know.
That's fair. The bosses are watching. Don't be
Exactly. So you know, if you feel good, you'll look good, right, my friend? You know that.
Look good, feel good, look good.
Yeah, this
Yeah, you look good, feel good. Okay, that's fair.
Look
that's
good,
fair.
feel good. You know, again, it's all about the heart. Okay, it's all about centering
Well,
down. to
it is an honor to be on your
no.
show,
No,
sir.
this is not
Tony
my,
P. Hour on
I
a
am
Friday.
just filling in, my friend. But final question before we go for the 10 o'clock. When you look at the track we're on, are we going to be close to having more consistent warmth as we
Yeah,
close this month?
we see
on that
a
track?
lot of more consensus. I still
Good.
think winter is going to show its ugly head one more time at some point, but right
Okay.
now it's probably second half of March.
Got
and
it.
usually, once you get past that spring equinox,
We're good to go.
Where usually any winter is brief and spring starts taking over quick.
Mike Thomas bringing me some positive news on this Friday night. Thank you, my
I
friend.
try.
I'll tell you, we are breaking a streak. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us here on the Live Zone Primetime, going through the graphs and
The Tony
everything, the
P. Live
pictures.
Zone is what we're
Oh,
calling it tonight.
Tony P. Live for one night. That's what we call it. It's a one-night special. Again, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Have a great weekend,
And of course,
everyone.
we can catch Mike on the 10 o'clock news tonight, talking about all this stuff and more about the weather headed your way. Thanks again, my friend. We'll
Of
see
course.
you soon.
See you soon.
All positivity here. I'm feeling great. And now we're going to bring in my guest host for the night. We're going to bring another member of our Fox 5 family. Here is Vernon Miles, one of our great writers and producers here, my friend. Welcome.
One of our OK writer producers.
Oh, come on. Listen, you are very good, my friend. Welcome to the Live Zone Primetime, my friend. How's your
Thank
Friday
you.
going so
It's
far?
great to be back. It's been pretty fantastic so
Good.
far. Working later than I usually do, but it's pretty
And-
chill on the night side here.
And we're very glad to have you, my friends.
Yeah.
And so we're going to start with a couple just of our major headlines to get you into the news. Again, if it's happening now and live, we're going to take you to it. So we're going to start with, of course, that tragic fire in St. Mary's County, Maryland. Today we're learning new details about the man who was killed in the deadly barn fire in St. Mary's County. TMZ is reporting first that it was an actor, or he was an actor, who had appeared on The Wire. Bobby J. Brown was the man who died in Tuesday's fire off of Roosevelt Boulevard in Chaptico. And family members told fire crews that Brown had gone into the barn to try to jumpstart a vehicle. The fire broke out and then spread quickly afterwards. Brown's wife sustained serious burns as well, trying to reach him, and he did die from smoke inhalation. He was 62 years old. We're sending so much prayers and love to the family of Bobby J. Brown, and just thinking about this a tragic fire, my friend. This is truly just, I mean, awful. Just an absolute tragedy.
Yeah, that stuff happens so quickly too. I think a lot of times we see these fire stories, people think, you know, oh, I have time to like grab something. You know, he was trying to jumpstart a vehicle in this case, and it's like it happens like that. It happens a lot faster than people expect.
Exactly. I mean, you think about just, you know, we've seen, whether it be with the natural gas pipeline in Centerville, with, you know, there's a fire there. Thank God nobody was hurt. But again, we're seeing families that are dealing with the impact of that, and just this is what you hope to not see. And again, as we just pray for his family during this time, it's just an awful thing to go through. And now we're going to move to the world of politics, and of course the Epstein files case and release has continued to take center stage, and it continued today, where former President Bill Clinton testified today in a closed-door deposition before the House Oversight Committee, answering questions for several hours about his past interactions with Jeffrey Epstein and what, if anything, he knew about Epstein's criminal conduct while the two were in contact. According to lawmakers, President Clinton acknowledged multiple meetings with Epstein in the early 2000s and confirmed previous reporting that he flew on Epstein's private aircraft during humanitarian travel connected to the Clinton Foundation. He reiterated statements that he made publicly for years that he has had no knowledge of Epstein's sex trafficking activities and ended contact well before Epstein's 2019 arrest. Committee members on both sides questioned Clinton about travel records, visitor logs, and introductions made through Epstein's social network, focusing on how Epstein maintained relationships with prominent political, business, and cultural figures, despite ongoing allegations that surfaced in the mid-2000s. Sources familiar with the deposition said investigators pressed Clinton on timelines, including when those timelines that concerned Epstein being first known within elite and social circles, and whether any warning signs were discussed privately among former President Clinton and associates at the time. Lawmakers from both parties, though, praised former President Clinton and said he cooperated fully and answered questions without invoking any privilege. At this stage, committee leadership has emphasized that Clinton is not accused of criminal wrongdoing, and today's testimony was part of a broader fact-finding effort tied to the document releases as well as witness testimony. So truly, Vernon, one of the biggest cases in the country that has been going on beyond this quick news cycle that we're so used to is continued on into 2026, and for very good reason.
Yeah, I can imagine this is probably going to continue on throughout this year.
Yes.
I think these are interesting hearings. I think we'll be, finding out more. The Republicans on the committee have talked about, they're going to release this to the public. The Clintons have said they want these meetings released to the public. So once that happens, I think we'll learn a little bit more about what was said in there. So far, it doesn't seem like anything explosive in either direction. Nothing that exonerates Clinton, but also not the slam dunk I think a lot of Republicans were hoping for. One of the things I've heard talked about is asking, why don't we see Howard Lutnick, the Treasury Secretary, I believe Treasury Secretary.
Yeah, Secretary of Commerce.
Secretary of Commerce, yeah.
You get both kind of get them both confused sometimes.
He's also been very much involved in the Epstein files. Should he be brought before this committee? That's been something that's been talked about as well. So I think the fact that the Clintons cooperated means that we could see some of this discussion continue, because if they hadn't cooperated, that would have given Republicans more fuel to say, well, it's being unfair here one way or the other.
Exactly, and this discussion is not only talking about, of course, this case and the horrendous sex trafficking and what it implicates in the world of kind of the elite social circles, but also the political world. It has been a firestorm across the board from both sides of the aisle. We have the perfect person to talk about this right now. We're going to bring in Malik Abdul, GOP strategist, campaign consultant, communication strategist, to break this down for us tonight, as well as the overall political implications of what the Epstein case has meant for how Americans and voters view their government right now. So, Malik, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Once again, my friend, here on the Live Zone Primetime.
Of course, thank you for having me. It's Friday. The boys are back in town. Right. We can get the party started right about now. So
if you had that song, we try to put it on at some point, maybe, to not have any issues with copyright. But let me ask you first, Malik, about this testimony with former President Clinton. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton testified yesterday. When thinking about this testimony, what are some of the things that voters, citizens can really gather from these type of hearings that are closed door, the depositions? And as we're seeing, Republicans are going to release some of that transcript as well. What can voters and citizens look for in these releases as we continue on?
Well, I think the first thing is you really can acknowledge that it's extraordinary. I think the first time in history where a former president had been called to testify before Congress. And it's worth, mentioning the backdrop of that is because over the past year or so, there's been an intense interest in the Epstein files, where you had many people, many Democrats even, saying that the Trump administration was not doing enough. A lot of this attention with the Epstein files, and I believe that a lot of it was based on the assumption that somehow Donald Trump was implicated. And in fact, we've had many people suggest that Donald Trump was implicated in a crime. I think what you're going to find out with these releases is that it's not a lot of there. Obviously, Republicans are going to use the opportunity to find out any sort of discrepancy or anything that they could find when it comes to not just Bill Clinton, but Hillary Clinton as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think, and I said the same thing when people were really gunning for Donald Trump on this, is that I don't think that we're going to find anything that exposes whether it's, Bill Clinton or even Donald Trump in any sort of crime. We've seen, and you've talked about it, and many people understand that Jeffrey Epstein was rich and powerful, and he hung out with a lot of rich and powerful people, even well beyond when he was initially charged with the crime and even convicted even. But I don't think that we're going to get, as far as the public, though, I don't think that we're going to get much out of there. We're going to get some clarification. I think Bill Clinton, what was that, maybe 20 or so times where he's listed as at least in the flight logs on Epstein's plane, and even an accuser. And it's important to know, it's an accuser who actually said that she flew on a plane to Africa with Bill Clinton. So we know that he's even been around an accuser. But even with that, I still don't think that we're going to see anything there. And I say that mainly because, for one, on the Donald Trump part, if there was evidence that Donald Trump was guilty in any sort of way, that would have been leaked by now. And I refuse to believe that the same would not have been leaked about a Bill Clinton, who at the end of the day is the former president of the United States.
Well, so, we talked about there may not be enough to charge for a crime, but there could still be other consequences of this. We saw Larry Summers, for instance, step down as a result of some of this. Do you think any of that could have an impact? Not criminal proceedings, but, other sort of ramifications of this?
So and it's funny because I was doing an interview with BBC, and they were asking a similar question where you've seen a number of people, at least in the UK, who have been removed from their positions or, sphere of influence. And the question was, do I see a similar thing happening here? And to be honest, no. I think that there is a big difference between the private sector and the federal, I won't just say our federal government, even in our state government. It's different, because we know that there are people who've been, we know people who've been convicted of crimes, who've been charged with crimes, who continue to serve on, whether that's at the state level or even at a federal level. So I don't think that, unless it's something explosive, something that directly ties an administration official, and whether that is a Biden administration official, a Trump administration official, unless we get something explosive, I don't think that we're going to see any sort of resignations. I think that, and you raised a question about Howard Lutnick. I do believe that if there is something there, then yes, Howard Lutnick, if we're going to bring a former president of the United States and a former first lady of the United States to testify, I do think that it's warranted that Howard Lutnick testify, because in his case, there was a clear discrepancy in what he said as far as the length of time that he maintained communications with Howard Lutnick. Well, I doubt that Republicans call him, but if Democrats take the House, I'm pretty sure that they absolutely will. And I think that in that case, with Howard Lutnick, as opposed to other people who are just simply named and, having a relationship with him, I think it's appropriate for Howard Lutnick to be called before Congress as well.
And when looking at those discrepancies, whether it be the image of Howard Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein that had some issues with that, as well as the recent situation with the outing of witness testimony or corroborating witnesses' names, and the report that came out yesterday about the DOJ potentially redacting and taking away files from President Trump, from a situation involving President Trump where he was named by a potential accuser of wrongdoing. Do you think some of those actions by DOJ can potentially lead to, a view that is not of innocence, but potentially of covering up? Are these type of strategies leading to mistrust in the public from folks that say, hey, we got to drain the swamp? Some of these actions by DOJ could be against that.
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, of course it is.
I try to ask it as clear as I could.
Yeah.
And delicately.
No, but, and I'll tell you, and I'll be honest and frank about it. We're about roughly a year in to the infamous binders full of nothing, really. Remember when Pam Bondi brought the MAGA influencers to the White House? They were hosted there by Caroline Leavitt as well, and they were going to expose the infamous Epstein files. Well, we know that there was nothing in those actual binders. Dan Bongino, who it was Donald Trump's deputy FBI director, built a cult following over the years on the Epstein files. He wasn't just, pushing conspiracies that Epstein killed himself, but there was a client list. That's what we've been talking about. And so to have the DOJ, when you start out with this binder full of nothing, the trust was already lost at this point. And I think the big thing for the Trump administration is because although people mischaracterized it, it wasn't as if Donald Trump was going out campaigning on the Epstein files, but Dan Bongino was, Kash Patel was, J.D. Vance was, and Donald Trump embraced these people as part of his administration. So he, unfortunately, DOJ, a lot of that trust was lost with DOJ really around this time last year. So anything that they do, and as someone who had to do FOIA requests and everything, I mean, pouring over 3 million documents is not an easy task. And I'll be honest about that. But anything that the DOJ does at this point will be heavily scrutinized because of the actions that DOJ has taken, even ignoring, delaying the actual release of the rest of the documents. This is something that's going to continue people are going to point the fingers. And it doesn't matter if nothing comes out of this, people will still believe that the DOJ is compromised because of DOJ's own actions.
Something you'd mentioned earlier was, the possibility of if Democrats take the House after the midterms, they could be calling Lutnick to Congress. What are some other changes you might see if there is a kind of turnover in the legislature?
Well, I think that Donald Trump officially becomes a lame duck at that point. They'll stop any legislation. And this is what happens when you have a divided Congress. You block all legislation. You block appointments. I suspect that they're going to get an impeachment. The House will impeach Donald Trump if Democrats take the office. I don't think outside of opposing Trump we'll see much from the Democratic Party. And that's largely because of where the numbers are now. When you look at polling, the fact that even after everything that we've seen, even on the immigration front, on the crime front, recent CNN polling comes out showing that Republicans and Donald Trump still rate higher than Democrats. So I don't think that we're going to see anything from Democrats on the affordability issue or anything like that. It's going to be in opposition, trying to roll back the clock on things that Donald Trump has done, but definitely calling not just a Trump administration officials to testify. I imagine that we're going to probably see some impeachment hearings, not just against Donald Trump, but a Pam Bondi, a Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth. I suspect that the Democrats are going to really lean into what their base wants, and the base wants blood.
And when we think about the last couple days, whether it be some of the kind of fiery back and forth between former Secretary Clinton and congressional Republicans, now we saw bipartisan praise today of former President Clinton's testimony. What do you attribute that to in the change in tone from both sides of the aisle on this? And does that signal potentially, we saw the bipartisanship with Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna on issues like this, and Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump meeting together, all that type of stuff, right? Like, do we see potentially some policy issues or situations like the Epstein files where there could be some bipartisan work to get positive stuff done?
I don't, okay, so in the nomenclature of politics, having one person of the other side support a piece of legislation is considered bipartisan. And I don't suspect that you will have many Republicans trying to cross over to work with Democrats on anything. And if the Democrats get the House, I don't think that they're going to be willing to work with their colleagues in the House on much of anything. I think because we live in such a politically toxic climate, that we probably will never get to the point where we agree on basic things. I personally don't think that Hillary Clinton nor Bill Clinton should have been called to testify. But even if you say, okay, well, there was a relationship there with Bill Clinton, there was no need for Hillary Clinton to testify. But this is part of the theatrics that we see oftentimes in Congress. So rest assured, if Democrats take the House, there'll be a lot of other performances where they'll call in Republicans, and we'll see the same sort of political theater that people just hate. And at the end of the day, it is the American people who are often always not served in these type of political tit for tat. Well, your side did it, so now I'm going to do it. And then it's just a constant whataboutism that literally does not help the American people. So I don't suspect that we're going to see much from this Congress at all. I think the partisanship is here to stay, and it is politicians now are emboldened by a lot of what we see online. So they're literally encouraged by a lot of what you see online, and it's now monetized in a way that I don't think that we're going to see much change there at all. I wish, but I don't think we're going to see much change there at all.
And one of those flashpoints is definitely the rights of, not right, but the situation with voting rights and the access to voting. We did see this week there's a draft executive order potentially that's being put together about nationalizing elections via foreign interference threats from 2020, for example. Based on your experience, do you see that happening at all from the president in terms of nationalizing elections, or do you see this being more of just some of the base wanting to rile things up?
I can pretty much assure that this is a bunch of red meat that Donald Trump is throwing out there. The context of the backdrop of this is the SAVE Act. Republicans want to pass the SAVE Act, which would do a number of things, not just as far as voter ID, but they would do a number of other things. Democrats are against it. When Joe Biden was in office, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, Democrats were for that. Republicans were against it. At the end of the day, both of them would have had both of the pieces of legislation would have nationalized the election. Donald Trump, as president of the United States, he can't nationalize an election because that's the whole idea of federalism and states' rights. But I think he's doing this symbolically because many people within the MAGA space still believe that our votes are, votes are not secure, and that the Trump administration, because he's getting a lot of pushback from MAGA, that he's not doing enough. So what Trump is doing really in this case is more so symbolic. And to the extent he's able to do anything, this type of stuff is going to be tied up in courts. You're going to have a lot of court challenges. But this is a symbolic thing that the president is doing to show that he's serious about the issue of voter fraud, but a nationalizing election. And the reason that we don't even have more Republicans saying that they're willing to kill the filibuster, nuke the filibuster in order to pass the SAVE Act is because they're concerned about the federal government usurping states' rights. And for conservatives, at least, it was supposed to be a thing where conservatives are definitely pro-states' rights, but some elements of the GOP SAVE Act really does trample upon the same states' rights that Democrats did with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
It's almost like kind of a mismatch of who's supporting what now. I don't want to keep you too long, but I have a couple questions, and one talks about one of the major elections in this race coming up for the midterms is the Texas Senate race. We're seeing competitive primaries on both sides, whether it be Paxton versus John Cornyn, the incumbent senator, or the major primary coming up for Democrats being Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman from Texas, versus James Tallarico, the state senator. Let me ask you first on your view of the Republican primary situation here. Do you see that potentially going to the insurgent candidate, Ken Paxton? And if that's the case, what does that mean for the GOP strategy with this seat? And could fears be higher of them losing that Senate seat?
So a couple of things about that. In Texas, in the GOP primary, I believe is different than the Democratic primary. So there will be if no candidate on the Republican side get to 50%, they have to go into a runoff. Right about now, we have Paxton. I think the latest polls were interactive polls showing that this time Cornyn is actually leading by a few percentage points. And you have Paxton and then Wesley Hunt, who is like in the he's like in the 20s. So it doesn't seem like either one of them will be able to cross the 50% threshold. So that means that who the top two, who I'm assuming will be Cornyn and Paxton, will go into a runoff, and then whoever wins that will go on into the general. The interesting thing about the GOP race is that Donald Trump has not endorsed the National Republican Senatorial Committee led by Tim Scott. They've been wanting Donald Trump to endorse the incumbent. Donald Trump will not, because MAGA, they consider Cornyn a rhino. So Donald Trump hasn't endorsed, but today, Cornyn was on the plane on Air Force One with Donald Trump as they headed to Texas. So we may be seeing, maybe after the start of the runoff, or at least whoever gets the last two, you may see Donald Trump endorse after that. I don't know if he'll endorse before that, but speaking of the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, what they want, what I've been talking to people over there, they want Jasmine Crockett to win. The reason that they want Jasmine Crockett to win is because even if a Paxton is the candidate, the polls are showing that Cornyn is much more competitive against beating Jasmine Crockett than Ken Paxton is himself. So they've been pushing, even though Tallarico has all of the fundraising, he's been killing it with the fundraising. Republicans have been trying to kind of amplify Jasmine Crockett's campaign because they believe that Jasmine Crockett will be easier to beat than a Tallarico, who in Texas terms is probably, when you compare him to Jasmine Crockett, Tallarico, in fact, is a bit more moderate, but there's been a lot of, I say they've been using the race card in the race where people who support Jasmine Crockett have been going after Tallarico, saying that he called one of the, I think Colin Allred, he was a mediocre black man and all of this type of stuff. He didn't actually say that. He said he had a mediocre race, but the black vote is actually churning out in places like Dallas. And I believe that Jasmine Crockett is really seeking to capitalize on this uptick in the black vote to make her competitive with Tallarico, who, again, as I said, is winning the race. He will actually be a harder candidate to beat, but I think that at the end of the day, even if Paxton wins, that a Republican will still carry. Well, I'm not going to say that because I just thought about it. Beto O'Rourke, I say this because Beto O'Rourke, I think in the last race that he ran with Senate against Ted
I think
Cruz,
it was something like that.
I think he only lost by like 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, against Ted Cruz. It was very, very tight. Now, let me ask you this on the Democratic side. Who do you think wins in this primary coming up next week? And what could it potentially say about the Democratic Party and its strategy going forward in these midterms?
So right now, at least the latest polls are showing that Jasmine Crockett has a double-digit lead over Tallarico. She jumped in the race after Tallarico, and so she's actually closed that gap and leaped over him as far as the numbers. So it looks as if, and this is just, it looks as if that Jasmine Crockett should expected to win next week. Whether or not she does, I don't know. I honestly think that if she does win, one of the things that it will signal about the Democratic Party is that, they want a fighter. And, Jasmine Crockett, at the end of the day, yes, she's performative. She does a lot of histrionics, but she is a fighter. And I think that that's what a lot of Democrats have complained about over the years, whether that in Trump's first term, Joe Biden's term, or even now in Trump's second time in the White House, is that they want people to fight. The challenge with Democrats doing that is that they've been running this fight in fight mode since 2016. And it simply just hasn't been successful. So the Democrats will, nominating a Jasmine Crockett, it is a signal that what we need to do in the midterm and even 2028 is that we need to fight. And I just don't think that as a political strategy, running against Donald Trump for the past 10 years, I just don't think that that is something that's going to be successful, because clearly, despite Donald Trump being called a racist, Hitler, Nazi, xenophobic, all of these things, Donald Trump still won in 2024. I think that the Democratic Party has to focus on not just those affordability issues, but the things that Americans are concerned about. And as a Republican, I'll say that they need to prosecute the case against Donald Trump, is he putting enough money in your pocket? Are you paying less at the gas pump? Like all of these sort of affordability things, Democrats need to focus on that as opposed to how much we hate Donald Trump and we can't wait to win so we can impeach him. I just don't think that that's ultimately going to be a winning strategy, especially because Donald Trump won't be on the ballot. Republicans won't have it easy, but I don't think that it's going to be the blue wave that everybody is expecting simply because of how unpopular the Democratic Party is as well.
Final question goes to GOP turnout. So one of the things we're seeing is that there was a poll that said only 65% of Republicans are excited to vote. And there has been a lot of issues in the more manosphere podcast world about the Epstein files and this issue with the swamp, right? That he did run on draining it and then it's not really happening the way they want it to, right? Do you think that this case with the Epstein files, the DOJ issues with that, how long this story has persisted, could potentially have an impact on GOP turnout in these midterms?
Not just could, it will. When you deal with these elections, especially off-year elections, momentum is everything. Your get out the vote strategy is everything. The people who are compelled to actually vote, all of that matters. If you look at the numbers thus far, in a number of the races, whether that's the Virginia race, the Virginia governor race, the New York governor race, what we're now seeing in Texas, you're seeing a lot of momentum on the Democrat side, which actually is very good for them. Republicans, we've kind of created a lot of problems on our own because it isn't just the Epstein issue. Yeah, there'll be a smaller amount of people who won't go out, feel dejected because they didn't get the answers when it comes to Epstein. But I think it's some of the other things that you were talking about, the promises that we're going to root out corruption, not really explaining what that actually meant. It was more so like a bumper sticker. We're going to root out corruption. And now people are saying, well, wait, the corruption is still there because it wasn't realistic in the first place. The idea that you're going to fire all of these people, yes, Doge was able to do some things, but rooting out the deep state looks great on a bumper sticker. It's just not something that's really practical. And I think that the Republicans are now dealing with that. And I'll end and say another thing that Republicans, which we saw it in 2020, 2021 in the Georgia special election, where in that election, Donald Trump by that point had already said the election was stolen from me in November of the previous year. And he was encouraging people not to go out to vote. So when you have Republicans saying vote day of, still not embracing early voting, mail-in voting, part of the SAVE Act is actually would get rid of some of these kind of early mail-in voting options that places have. They're not encouraging their own voters to vote, where Democrats are charged and ready to go. So Republicans truly may have a turnout problem, not just during the primary, but definitely in the general as well. We have a real problem, and some of that we've created on our own.
Very interesting points. And again, I think that really gets to the populism angle of both sides of the aisle. We're seeing with Mayor Mamdani and President Trump working on housing things together.
The bromance.
Right. Like there is there's some weird kind of tectonic shifts where there is some momentum, but I think some of those voters that did vote for the president in the more independent, right-leaning independents, the podcasters, may not, because they view these central issues like the Epstein files, affordability, as those kind of rock stalwart
But immigration
issues.
Too, though.
Right. ICE as well.
When you look at the numbers, Donald Trump is well underwater by double digits when it comes to independence. So all of these, the coalition that they bragged about, and this time was last year saying, look, that vote ain't permanent. It ain't here to stay. We need to do something to appeal to these groups. Well, where are the podcast bros now?
Yep.
They're nowhere to be found. Where have all of these, different groups that Donald Trump had made inroads with? Well, his numbers are actually down. Black voters, Hispanic voters, independent voters, women voters. So we have a job on our hands. But again, it's a problem that Republicans, at least in this sense, and I'll say that as a Republican strategist, it is a problem that Republicans created. And if we don't win or lose, I'll say, by a large margin during the midterm cycle, I think some people will probably be shocked by that.
There's definitely a lot of these political wins that are just changing, and they're so quick now with the advent of social media. And I got to tell you, my friend, this was the interview we've always wanted to do, Malik. This podcast style interview. We covered everything, okay? We went from Epstein
Well,
files,
you know I can talk.
corruption. No, and that's what I love about you. We covered everything from corruption through the political strategy, because there's so many things happening at once. I think it's important to have the opportunity to break these things down deliberately and really make sure people understand what's at stake and what's coming next. And Malik Abdul, GOP strategist, campaign consultant, comm strategist, you gave us everything tonight, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the Live Zone Primetime and just giving our viewers a really good roadmap of what the political climate is looking like.
Thank you, brothers. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.
You guys have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And next time we'll have a good music playlist next time for Malik as well. I'm looking forward to that. And again, just really a good conversation, Vernon, about so many things that are at stake here. Because again, the tectonic plates are shifting in the social media era where not every voter is staying in their place. They're going like free agents to different parts of it.
Yeah, I think it's telling that pretty much every election we've seen in the last decade almost has been a surprise in one way or another.
Right, even 2022.
You know, everything basically since Obama, since the since that first Trump election, every single election that I've been covering here, you know, it's been a nail biter. It's been, you know, we haven't really been sure which way it was going to go, even up until those final moments.
Exactly.
So, you know, honestly, anything could change between now and the midterms. I remember in 2024, there was the presidential assassination attempt, and everybody's like, oh, you know, this might be it. Like, this is a big game change, something like that. You know, we could still have, what's the old political term for it? Is it like a October surprise or something?
Who knows?
Yeah.
And we still have a lot of months left, and many things are at stake here in the political war right here in D.C. and around the country. Now, coming up next in the Live Zone Primetime, we're finally taking a break. We've been talking for a long time.
I can go to work.
Sorry, and I kept you for so long. A lot of stamina here tonight. We're going to do my rundown, so I'll be kind of two roles tonight. Rundown of some of the stories I'm looking at around the country from national news and local news as well. Coming up next here on the Live Zone Primetime.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Live Zone Primetime here on Fox 5 and Fox Local. Tony P here in for producer Chris in a different chair tonight. And thank you for having the stamina for sticking with me. I know we had a long interview there, but I wanted to give you as much detail as possible. And now I'm going to give you some more details of what I'm looking at around the country and in your neck of the woods. And we're going to start right here in D.C., but also sort of in Texas. Federal officials closed airspace today near Fort Hancock, Texas, after a U.S. military laser-based defense system mistakenly shot down a U.S. Customs and Border Protection surveillance drone. Congressional aides said the drone was misidentified as a threat during border security operations. The FAA issued a temporary flight restriction while agencies reviewed coordination failures between the Pentagon and CBP. It marks the second laser-related airspace shutdown in Texas this month, raising safety concerns about interagency communication and commercial aviation as well. Right here in Washington, tensions escalated between the Pentagon and artificial intelligence company Anthropic today as CEO Dario Amodei refused Defense Department requests to loosen safety guardrails on the company's Claude AI system for military applications. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned the company could face restrictions on future federal contracts, and today, President Trump did direct agencies to begin phasing out Anthropic systems for government workflows, escalating a broader dispute over military AI oversight. In California, newly released deposition testimony added new scrutiny to the catastrophic Palisades fire last year. Veteran firefighter Scott Pike testified that crews left the earlier Lachman fire scene while hot embers were still active. Pike said he personally observed red-hot coals and heard crackling days before the blaze reignited, and told supervisors continued suppression was needed. Attorneys representing fire victims argue the testimony suggests that initial fires were not fully contained before it flared into the larger disaster that killed 12 people and destroyed approximately 6,000 structures. City officials have disputed portions of the account and said investigations into procedures are ongoing. Media consolidation remained under political pressure, of course, for the Netflix, Warner Brothers, and Paramount situation, as Democratic lawmakers formally questioned the proposed Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount transaction, raising concerns about newsroom independence and media concentration involving CBS News assets and CNN. Internal communications also showed Warner Brothers employees expressing uncertainty about potential restructuring and layoffs as negotiations continue. In Buffalo, New York, the death of Nurul Amin Shah Alam, a 56-year-old Rohingya refugee from Myanmar, sparked outrage today. Alam, who was nearly blind and spoke limited English, was dropped off by Border Patrol agents at a Tim Hortons recently without notifying family members. He was later found dead days after disappearing in the winter conditions, and local officials described the situation as preventable and called for federal accountability. On foreign policy, nuclear talks between the United States and Iran ended in Geneva without an agreement. President Trump today publicly said he was not happy with the pace of negotiations and reiterated that military options remain on the table if diplomacy fails. U.S. envoys included Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met Iranian officials through Omani mediation, focusing on uranium enrichment limits and sanctions relief. Iranian leaders insisted they would not dismantle the nuclear program and maintain that their activities are for civilian energy purposes. In the world of business, economic data today showed wholesale inflation remained firm, with the producer price index rising 0.5% in January, largely by a 0.8% increase in service costs. Year-over-year wholesale prices rose 2.9%, while the core measure, excluding food and energy, climbed 3.4%, reinforcing concerns that inflation pressures persist. The IRS reported today that the average tax refund so far this season is approximately $2,476. I can't even do math, folks. About 14% higher than at the same point last year. However, the total number of refunds issued is slightly lower compared to 2025, though. And the Nancy Guthrie investigation, new security footage showed a vehicle speeding through her neighborhood around the time she disappeared. Authorities said the video is being analyzed right now as part of an expanding timeline as detectives continue reviewing surveillance data and public tips, trying to find Nancy Guthrie and return her home safely. In the entertainment world, Hollywood's shift towards microdramas accelerated in the recent months, with studios investing in short serialized episodes, often under 10 minutes long, designed for mobile viewing and rapid release cycles, targeting younger audiences like yours truly here, that are accustomed to short-form digital content put out by people like me. So I apologize to the movie industry, because us influencers are doing that. And finally, for our Black History Month Spotlight of the Day, our final Black History Month Spotlight of the Day, we highlight Ethel Waters. She was one of the first African-American stars of early television, headlining the Ethel Waters Show in 1939 during television's experimental era. A pioneering singer and actress, Waters later earned an Academy Award nomination for Pinky in 1949 and became the first black woman nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award in 1962. Across music, film, radio, and television. She helped break racial barriers and expand opportunities for black performers across American entertainment. And when thinking about one of the issues that I really am drawn to is this overall consolidation with Warner Brothers and Paramount, because I think when there's a lot of concern about what it means for news and storytelling and what it also could mean for the political angle because of the assets like CNN, for example, and how close David Ellison, Larry Ellison, the major backers of Paramount who are behind all this, are close to the White House. Now, what's interesting to me is what I'm hearing throughout social media channels as well as this news gathering is that this is actually a really bad deal overall because Warner Brothers assets are declining and have a lot of debt behind them, and that Netflix really got out pretty easily with this, where they're going to have their fees restored to them and they won't have a lot of debt on hand. So I think when you look at it, you could potentially see a lot of Warner Brothers content being distributed through Netflix channels eventually, based on bringing two big assets like Paramount and Warner Brothers together could lead to a slower growth and potentially both of these studios being carved up eventually to be bought or distributed by Netflix. So I think overall, this case is very much about what does it mean for news gathering? What does it mean for bias in the news? Is it going to be directed by the White House because of how close Larry Ellison and David Ellison, now the CEO of Paramount, Skydance, and potentially this Warner Brothers merge, whatever it looks like, their ties to the White House and what that could mean overall. So I just think as we look at these things in the future, it's going to be interesting, not just what it means for content, but what it means for how you get your news and what it means for independent creators that are putting out short-form series like we just talked about, as well as news. Now, coming up next, we will do, coming back here on the Live Zone Prime, we have a few more stories we'll cover on the local end, and we'll talk a few more about our weekends ahead before we head to this weekend. Coming up right next here on the Live Zone Primetime. Welcome back to the Live Zone Primetime here on Fox Local and Fox 5 DC. Tony P here in for producer Chris in a different role tonight. And as we always talk about, if we have a story that is live or is really new, we're going to bring it to you. And we have some very sad news coming out of the world of music tonight. Pop culture icon Neil Sedaka passed away today, and getting so many tributes from around the country for his incredible work overall, and just truly, you know, an amazing presence in music. Really was one of the innovators of pop music, blending that with, I like to kind of call it like love music, very like wholesome, great just tunes that define a generation. And I'll give you a quick just, you know, story overall. You know, my mother and I are very much into older music, and one of the songs that I learned first was Laughter in the Rain by Neil Sedaka, and truly just an amazing icon in music and just pop culture overall, and just truly a really great icon and musician. And it truly is sad when you think about all these legends that have just, you know, we have lost this year and in the past year or so. Really one of like the greats in this space. He's also written for a lot of artists as well, and I just really wanted to, you know, highlight his impact on me, because a lot of folks look at me and say, how can a 27-year-old kid like this type of music? But I grew up on this stuff. My mother, my grandmother introduced me to people like Neil Sedaka and to Boz Scaggs and so many others. It's just, when you see someone like this pass away, Rito Shuffle, right, like so many great songs, I mean, Laughter in the Rain and all these things that he has done. I mean, to see him, you know, pass away at 86 years old today in Los Angeles, just truly, you know, just a sad day, because again, he had so many great just hits that were in there. Laughter in the Rain, Bad Blood, Stupid Cupid with Connie Francis in that collaboration. He also helped write Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain and Tennille, a great song if you like listening to old commercials, as well as someone who just likes good overhaul romantic music. And he was inducted, another cool note, inducted in the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1983, which is really a great measure of his brilliance, because being a great songwriter and a performer, I always talk about Neil Diamond being like this. He's also in the both Hall of Fames, rock and roll and songwriters. Neil Sedaka is one of those people that wrote songs for great artists and was able to make music and just make memories overall. So he will be absolutely missed, and just truly so sad today of the passing of Neil Sedaka at the age of 86 today. It was from an undisclosed medical emergency. We don't know exactly what caused his death at the moment, but he did pass away today at 86 years old. So I hate to close on a sad note, but that will do it all for here on the Live Zone Primetime. Tony P. and producer Chris tonight, thank you so much for joining us here in the Live Zone Primetime. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday. All right.